Hello, everyone. I would like to introduce you to our case project, Atoms for Peace, by Dwight D. Eisenhower, brought to you by Tero Haboyan and Daisha Wallace. Atoms for Peace. Dwight D. Eisenhower's speech about atoms for nuclear warfare was extremely important for political history. Eisenhower gave the speech during the Cold War. Americans had already been tense about the situation. The speech was about the use and creation of nuclear weapons, which had been kept quiet for national history. During the speech, Eisenhower addresses many different aspects of audience. Rhetorical audience. A rhetorical situation is the circumstance of an event that consists of an issue, an audience, and a set of constraints. Eisenhower's speech consisted of all three of these situations more than once. His audience were multiple groups of people, the issue was nuclear warfare, and the set of constraints were the people of the world. Implied audience. Implied audience are the audience that the writer or speaker intends the speech or text for. In the case of Eisenhower's speech, his implied audience is the Soviet Union. Eisenhower's speech is implying that the Soviets shouldn't begin a war with America, as we have also been working on nuclear weapons as well. Primary audience. The primary audience are those who get the speech communicated directly towards them. Of course, Eisenhower has a primary audience as well. During the speech Atoms for Peace, his main audience was the United Nations. As Eisenhower's speech is somewhat a declaration of war, if the other party acts on his speech, he needed to make sure that UN clearly got the message that nuclear warfare was headed this way. Second persona. The second persona is called the implied audience. This is when the role is assumed by the audience in response to the speech. You can make the argument that the second persona was the entire world. The speech is addressed to the UN, which means it is indirectly addressed to the world. The entire world, after listening to the speech, would assume a role based on the understanding they had from the speech. Fourth persona. The fourth persona states an audience who recognizes that the rhetoric's first persona may not reveal all that is relevant about the speaker's identity, but maintains silence in order to enable the rhetoric to perform the persona. In this case, the fourth persona audience is America. America must remain silent and allow Eisenhower to continue delivering his speech. America knows, as being the fourth persona, that they need to let their president address the other audience for the benefit of America. Effective timing. Timing also influences your audience. Eisenhower's speech was delivered at the peak of the Cold War. The language he had to use to make sure he didn't pull any triggers influenced how the Soviets and the rest of the world would take his message. Eisenhower had delivered a message of threats that Soviet didn't want to harm the US. If Eisenhower and his team didn't perfect the speech beforehand, they might have had not avoided war at all costs. Know your audience. Of course, before giving a speech, you need to do your research on your audience. As we all know, Eisenhower had multiple audiences. He would need to address each and every one without leaving any loose ends. When loose ends are left and your audience hasn't gotten the answer for their question or concern, the audience begins to speculate, which can lead to them misinterpreting your message. Concerns of not knowing your audience. If Eisenhower failed to do research on each of his audience members, the UN, USA, Soviet Union, and the world, things could have turned out very bad for the US. If Eisenhower had over-threatened the Soviet Union, or had used a poor choice of words, that the Soviets could have launched an attack on the US. If Eisenhower didn't address the US citizen, he might have gotten backlash that wouldn't help his presidency. Eisenhower and his team clearly researched his audience and addressed every one of them separately.
President of the United States, Dwight Eisenhower, titled Atoms for Peace. In 1953, on December 2nd, Eisenhower presented a speech in hopes that he would encourage people to use atomic research for good and not to create destructive war. Beliefs are sets of knowledge that are grounded in people's value orientations. Eisenhower's argument was based on his belief to promote peaceful use of nuclear research in order to benefit mankind, but people seen it as a campaign to persuade them into the Cold War. Eisenhower knew the Cold War was escalating and America wasn't the only nation without nuclear power. Eisenhower believed that doing nuclear research would serve mankind well. He said in his speech, quote, "I know that the American people share my deep belief that if a danger exists in the world, there is a danger shared by all," end quote. Eisenhower stood firmly on his beliefs that not doing research would be harmful to mankind and having hope in one nation can be shared amongst them all. Rhetorical audience is the audience that consists only of those persons who are capable of being influenced by discourse or bringing change. In a rhetorical audience, the audience should have already the ability to implement the change the writer calls for. Eisenhower delivered his speech to the United Nations at a time where people in America were scared of the research coming about because they knew it could produce atomic bombs. Not all audiences have the power to affect change in the world. Both the writer and the audience possess agency, which is known as audience agency. Depending on their culture, financial status, and ideologies, it will contain different levels of agency. Having the right group to address the symbolic action to, which leads to people pushing for change, can be limited. Public emotions are collective expressions of feelings that are crucial elements of democratic deliberation, judgment, and action that comprise a language for collective life. During the time of Dwight Eisenhower's speech, people weren't fans of nuclear research or warfare. They knew it was the cause of atomic bombs and had strong negative attitudes towards it. The role of the audience is to agree and promote for pleasant, nonviolent research on nuclear weapons. Eisenhower conceives the audience to invoke concepts of universal peace and to have hope to achieve more tasks and accomplishments. He hopes the audience will share their wisdom, courage, and faith to bring lasting peace to all nations. Attitudes are described as positive and negative feelings towards some person, thing, or idea. Values and beliefs go hand in hand, informing you of your attitude. An attitude identifies what you like and dislike, as well as things you approve and disapprove. After Eisenhower's speech, the audience should have a positive or negative change in attitude. Identification is the communicative process through which people are unified into a whole on the basis of common interest or characteristics. Eisenhower uses his identity to relate to the military and U.S. citizens that he understands this language is new and in the past was preferred to have never been used. He encourages everyone to have knowledge on atomic warfare and that not knowing puts them in greater danger.